We are Art Viewing Adventures, and we are going to be talking about a pretty well-known and popular California artist, a guy by the name of Wayne Thiebaud. And I'm joined by two of my favorite museum guides, Charlie Goldberg and Dragana Monson. Welcome, Charlie and Dragana. And
Hi.
let's get started. Let's start talking about Wayne Thiebaud, and let's take a minute to talk about, this is an image that you will see if you go to this exhibition, which is at the Legion of Honor through August 17th. What are we looking at, either Charlie or Dragana?
Well, I'll start. We're looking at a bunch of postcards that Wayne Thiebaud painted of some of his favorite artworks throughout the history. And some of you may recognize Mondrian and Cezanne and Monet over there, right? And it's called 35 Cents Masterworks because it's a bunch of postcards on a stand in some museum, right?
Yeah, it's like kind of a catalog of his favorite artists. And the premise of the show is that Wayne Thiebaud, here's a self-portrait of Thiebaud. He said he was the greatest art thief, maybe the greatest art thief in history, that he loved copying all these other artists. And we're going to see just examples of that again and again and again. It's almost like a game you can play at this exhibition. Anything to add to that, Charlie?
Well, Picasso has a very famous quote that says, "Good artists borrow, great artists steal." And, this is really fits in the vein of what Picasso was saying. Thiebaud openly admitted that he steals from other artists. And I think that this exhibit does such a great job of showing his influences.
And he's not just stealing, he's also learning. And I think that was the point of so many of his works, that he's looking at somebody who came before him and learning from the artist. The artist.
And putting it in his vocabulary, his artistic vocabulary. Yeah.
Indeed.
So let's get started. Let's start. This is kind of, he has so many great paintings of desserts. He obviously liked his sweets. And this confections from 1962. So we'll take a look at what it's being compared to. This is Morandi Still Life. And let's take a look at both of them together. So let's start, Charlie. What do you think's going on here with these two paintings?
Well, he's clearly using the same composition that Morandi did. He's not using the same objects, but he's even putting the fruit cup with I assume it's ice cream, I'm not sure, with the strawberry on top. He's putting that in the foreground, just like Morandi did with this blue to the right. Yeah, the blue container that he's got there. But it's clearly the same compositional idea. You've got three objects basically on the same plane, and then one that's pushed forward. And the other thing that he's doing that Morandi did in his work, and I'm going to use an art term here, which is that he used a lot of impasto. And what I mean by impasto is the thick application of paint. And you can see for sure in the Thiebaud, all those sort of dark lines that you see across. What you're seeing is the three-dimensional lifting of the paint off the canvas, which is something that Morandi used to do as well.
I also just want to add that not only that they are three objects on the same plane, but they are also three vertical objects. And the one that is in front of them is kind of different shape and it's pushed back. And so he is really emulating. He is just, composition is pretty much the same, even though objects are not the same. And talking about impasto, looking at that ice cream in the middle or one on the left, all of them actually, you almost can lick them, right? I mean, they feel like the cream is right there in front of you, and it's very tactile, very rich. You can taste it.
Yeah, I should mention, you people are welcome to put thoughts into chat, or if you want to raise your hand and add a comment, we'd love to hear that. because I think a lot of people, we have a very good turnout today, and a lot of people love these paintings. Now, there's a feature that you guys wanted to call out in these paintings. We've got this close up. Charlie, tell us about this close up and why you wanted us to kind of zoom in.
Well, one of the things that I think you Thiebaud is an artist that you need to see live. You need to be in front of the canvas. And the first reason is that reason of the impasto that we talked about, that thick application of paint. But the other thing that he does, which you wouldn't really notice just by looking at a photo of the painting, is the way he utilizes different colors along the edges. He used to use the term halation, which comes from the word halo. And this idea that you get these different colors, which his theory was that, if you stare at something long enough, you'll see these colors in there, and you'll see that the colors change so that, they may start off orange, but then they become sort of greenish and then come back down to orange. On the other side, if you look at the very edge, there's some red along the blue. And there's other examples of that when you look at his paintings up close. It's a really wonderful aspect, and it's something that the curators have used, because if you look at the border of the rooms that they're in, they're using that same idea of halation, the idea of, I think they're using blue and orange, if I'm not mistaken, all along the borders of the room. And, they're sort of playing off on what Thiebaud does in his paintings.
And Thiebaud is really here also referencing Joseph Halberst and his color theory of how placing their two different colors, blue and orange or whatever, changes the adjacent color. And he's definitely using that in his paintings.
Yeah, it's in your, like, the curation of this exhibition at the Legion of Honor is really amazing.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's fantastic.
And you'll definitely want to have eaten your lunch before you go to this thing, because you're going to be seeing a lot of really good food. So here's this half salmon that he's done. This is from 1961, which is kind of shortly after he's created this style. But we are comparing it with Manet's painting The Salmon from 1864. And let's look at both of those together. So Charlie, I think you liked this pairing. What is it about this that really works for you?
Well, again, he's really making us think of Manet by doing this painting. He's directly referencing this painting. And so what we see is that half-cut salmon, so that we see the flesh of the salmon in both of these paintings. Now, he's doing a much simpler version. Manet is doing a more classical still life, in that he has the lemons and he has the glass and the wine bottle, and the little saucer to the left. So that's a much more classical still life that you might see amongst many Dutch artists, for example. But here he's really paring it down to the simplest elements. He's paring it down to this half-cut salmon. He's got a casserole dish in the background, and he's got this very, very plain counter instead of having this tablecloth. But again, because he's using impasto, that thick application of paint, you get the sense like you get these undulations, just like you would with a tablecloth.
And looking at it, I love how his light on the salmon and how it's reflecting off the shiny skin of the salmon is very similar on both paintings. You see how they play, how he is playing off Manet's approach to the fish.
So when you look at what he's copied, it's him actually telling us things about Manet, right? Like, here's my light, and then here's the light on the other one.
Absolutely.
And we do have a close-up of this one too, so you can see more of this halation.
And also impasto too, right? Look, the thickness of the paint. You can kind of see it. You can almost see him putting that with, I don't know, did he use brush in this case, or did he use palette?
I think here he's using a brush rather than a palette knife. I'm pretty sure that with some of them, like when you look at some of his cakes, he is literally using the same techniques that people who ice cakes would use. He's
Right.
literally trying to get that same movement, and he's using a palette knife with those. I think here he's using a brush, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to, maybe there's going to be a biography of him that will tell us, like, did he actually bake himself? And what would it be like to have a Wayne Thiebaud cake for real? Let's here's another one I think shows some great halation guitar from 1962, and then there's this Picasso guitar, which is actually a sculpture on the wall from 1914, and here are the two of them together.
Yeah.
So Dragana, let's start with you. What's going on here?
Well, he's taking that object, same object, but in Picasso's case, it's I believe it's cardboard model, if you want, or a three-dimensional representation of guitar, which was actually very common subject of Picasso's Cubist period. And what Thiebaud is doing is making a much more representational, or it's more direct, right, translation of the shape of the guitar, and you can kind of see it how he's admiring this very curvaceous, very sensual almost object on a wall, and then again playing with that halo effect with that green on the shadow. Look at that green. It's as luscious as it can be, and how it outlines and gives that guitar almost presence, human presence.
Yeah,
That's
anything to add to
great
that?
work. And, I'm a guitar player, so of course I love this. But again, he's using colors which the average artist would not. If you look at just below the neck of the guitar and just above the sound hole, for example, you can see a horizontal stripe of blue. Most guitars, certainly of this style, are not going to have blue, and yet he finds this color to use. And then, of course, he's using, as Dragana pointed out, that green and then white along the edge of the shadow. I think we have a close-up, Rodney,
We
if
do.
I'm not mistaken. And you can really see all these colors that you would not expect to see. If you look at the right edge of this guitar where it curves in, you're seeing blue shadow there. So, guitars, don't have blue along their fixative tape on the side of it, but he's finding that and he's using that, which is what makes his work so wonderful and really something that's not easy to see on a photograph, which is why you really want to be there and experience it for yourself.
Yep. And then let's move on to this one. This is early. So this is 1960. And one of the things that really excited me about the show was you can kind of see the moment where Thiebaud becomes Thiebaud. He comes up with his style that's very recognizable. But this is from before that. And so this is called The Scholar. And then we are comparing it with this one from Paul Cézanne. And then let's have both of them together. So, Charlie, what strikes you about the comparison of these two paintings?
Yeah, as you said, Rodney, I don't think he's developed into the full mature Thiebaud style that we know and love. He's still experimenting with a lot of these styles. And when you look at that painting on the left, it's very much like an abstract expressionist painting.
Yep.
You see a person, but all the lines and angles that he creates within the books. And you look at the desk, you're not even sure what you're looking at. That's literally on the desk. This is almost like some of Giacometti's early or Giacometti's drawing / paintings. We think of Giacometti as a sculptor, but he did a lot of wonderful works like that could have been like this. And then, of course, we compare this to the Cézanne, and Cézanne, of course, has his own style, but this is what he's looking at. This is what he's trying to make us think of when he's doing this painting on the left. I might add, by the way, when we say we're comparing it to this, it's actually the curators of the museum
Yes.
that have put these together. They're the ones who are making the connection. This is not something that the three of us came up with on our own.
Right.
That's a good point. In every single one of the paintings in the exhibition has these things that they've compared them to. And we think that Thiebaud often was telling them
Yeah,
about
he
this,
did.
not always, right?
He, not always, but often he did. He wrote about where inspiration came from. So they had very good, I think, guidelines from him. What I'd like to point in this one, to me, besides the subject, okay, it's a scholar with the books in front of him. To me, the colors are what Thiebaud is getting from Cezanne, and converting them or using them for his own purposes over here on the left. And those blues and with some terracottas and yellows in it, you can see how they're um, similar in the sense of the coloring is very similar. Mood is somewhat similar. Even light on his face, if you look at it, it's coming more or less from same direction.
Rodney, we have a question from
Yeah,
Marsha.
go ahead, Marcia, unmute.
Oh, it was more of a comment that I had this feeling that he looked at the old work and he said, I'm going to inject energy. And so, yes, both figures are static, but we have the carefully ordered books on the right. And then we have this, not only are the books in disarray, the lines around them is all this energy. So to me, this is the 60s. We're gonna break open what society is. I have no idea.
I mean,
That's
you
a
could
great
call it
comment,
either way.
Marsha. There is a tremendous amount of energy in the work on
Yep.
the left. Again, you don't
Yeah.
really notice that later. Well, I shouldn't say that because with his cityscapes, you do notice a lot of
Yes.
energy in his work. But in his still lifes, there is this sort of calm tranquility. You're not seeing that here. He hasn't developed his full style here.
Yep.
I mean, it's still great. I still love this painting on the left, but it's not the Thiebaud that we are familiar with. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I love the
Yes.
way, like, there's just like this dividing line. Like in 1960, he comes up with this new way of doing paintings. And then from then on, that's what you're going to see. We've got another one of the early ones. This is called Beach Boys, 1959. So just at the end of this period when he's doing these other things. And then it's actually a couple of other paintings that it's being compared to. So both Cezanne and Murillo, but if we look at them all together, we can kind of see that this painting that he did is including, it's kind of referencing both these other paintings.
Yeah. He's using poses of the figures by Cezanne and Murillo, but then, of course, giving them his own take. And the style itself is, again, that abstract expressionist prevalent at that period, very loose, very energetic, very full of movement that he's applying on this particular painting.
And, of course, Cezanne influenced Picasso. I mean, we saw Picasso doing sort of a similar figure as well. I mean, that's an odd way for a person to stand with your hands sort of flattened towards the anterior portion of your torso like that. So, it's a signature. And when he does that, those who know art history know to think about the Cezanne, know to think about Picasso. The Murillo to me is less obvious, but when you put them side by side,
Yeah.
it's
You'll
really
see it.
clear. But there's sort of to me, I saw this painting on the left, and the person that I thought of was a Spanish painter named Sorolla, who did any number of beach scenes. And this one has a sort of similar feel. There are others that have closer to the palette that Thiebaud is using. Do we have this side by side or
I didn't do
No.
that.
Yeah. But if we just go back, you can
Yes.
see how there's sort of a similarity between what Thiebaud is doing. And, Thiebaud was just a real art scholar. He taught art all his life. So he would have known Sorolla's work. And, so I think the museum's choices of Murillo and Cezanne are spot on. Don't get me wrong. I think they're really, really great. But when I saw this painting, I immediately thought of Sorolla and his beach paintings.
Yeah, the
Can I
subject and color too, right?
Right.
And could I ask for clarification? Did Thiebaud openly say I was inspired by Murillo and this other one, or is that all the curators doing?
in some cases, he openly said, very clearly said and quoted what he did, but not always. I don't know in this particular case if he said it himself.
I also think the
Okay,
Thiebaud
thank you.
family has been involved in the curation of this exhibition, and so they were giving advice on this also,
Yeah.
saying, you know, that this is definitely what Dad was thinking about.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to anybody connecting here from Sacramento? This is kind of your a view of your city, and then here's like this is not a very well-known painting, but let's look at them side by side. So Dragana, Charlie, who wants to go first?
Well, I'll go. It's just the subject matter. In this, you see it with the bridge in the background and this tremendous, beautiful light in the middle of the river. And I think that seemed to me that's where your eye goes to, and he is directly translating one on the right into his own painting 50, 60 years later. So.
And of course, he's coming up with his own creations as well. So, for example, if you look at the left border of Thiebaud's painting, which is the one on the left, you know, here's this highway, which is done in such a typical Thiebaud style, which is to say that the highway doesn't really make sense. It's at an angle that's not natural. But he doesn't mind. He likes to play with that idea. He likes to sort of twist our visions of what we're looking at. You know, and plus, I don't know Sacramento well, but is there a bridge that looks like that?
In Sacramento?
Yeah, there
Look
is a
like that?
bridge.
The Gold-
Bridge
the Gold Bridge.
does. Bridge does. With yellow posts.
It
But
does,
the
yeah.
highway, I don't believe so.
Well,
I don't
and
know.
there's no highway in
No.
Sacramento that doesn't
No.
have terrible traffic on it. I mean, this is like I've never driven through Sacramento in such a mellow
Empty.
situation. I see a comment in chat from Gail. The road on the left is nearly vertical, much like his city road pieces later on. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll see
True.
those in just a minute. The other thing that I think that he's doing here with the painting on the left is I think he's also nodding towards Turner's work. You know, just by his use of the palette. I mean, these are colors that you might see in a Turner painting. And so, you know, he's just constantly making reference. You know, art comes from art. He's looking at Turner. He's looking at Lee. He's looking at all these other, you know, painters constantly. He's reworking them and he's putting them within his own context, within his, you know, his own modern life. You know, he's just outside of Sacramento. I mean, that's where he lives. So this is, you know, this is him turning a Turner painting into his own reality, which I think is really great.
Yeah, I mean, people sometimes describe this program that we do as an art history program, and I always bristle at that because I'm always thinking we're kind of talking about what's in the moment. But in this case, this exhibition really is an art history lesson.
Absolutely.
You're getting both Thiebaud's like 20th century work and all the things that it's referencing throughout art history. And my wife is on the program today. She took an art history class with Thiebaud at UC Davis. She's one of many people who did that. And he wasn't teaching just to other people in like the art department. She was studying something else, and he wanted to reach everybody. He didn't think art was just for the art community.
He was a great teacher, not just studio, but undergraduates. And of course, Wayne Thiebaud was very loved at Davis, UC Davis, and the class was quite popular. And this is bringing me back to those days. So thank you for that.
So go Aggies. You know, Jane is pointing out this bridge is on the nightly news in Sacramento. This is the view of Sacramento from the west. Yeah, it's a great view. All right, so we were talking about cityscapes, and here's one, Laguna Rise. This one was cool because I'd never really seen this before. I'm not sure which museum has this.
It's very late. You saw the date, 2018. That's really, really late. By this time, he's 98 years old. Think about it.
Yeah, this guy, he kept he lived to be 101. He was playing tennis until he was 99 years old. Just a great liver of life on top of everything else. And then it's compared to this Velazquez.
I don't think it's Velazquez, Rodney.
Okay.
This is from the school of Goya.
Okay, from the school of
Yeah,
Goya.
this is the school of Goya, not
Right.
Velazquez. Yeah.
Like that. I guess I saw that somewhere. So here we are comparing these two works. What do we see going on in these two works?
But both are very surreal to me. They're certainly not representing any sort of reality that at least I know. Have you ever seen the city on top of
In San Francisco has some
rock?
pretty steep streets, but nothing quite like this,
Nothing
right?
like that. And in the painting on the right, it to me really feels very menacing. And knowing that it is school of Goya and knowing some of the Goya's paintings of war it really brings kind of sense of menace and sense of unease and that I definitely see in the painting on the right, and one on the left also kind of say, how do I get there, and what do I do once I get up there?
And where do you park?
And where do
Yeah.
you park on top of it?
Yeah, see, it's like picking up the reds. So
Yep.
you've got these reds that seem to be picking up the reds here.
And blues, and yeah, coloring is very similar with that white building on the right getting translated in the whole city on top of the rock in
Right. And when you
Thiebaud's
see
version.
this painting on the left live, you really are impressed with the impasto, the thick application of paint. I looked at this painting from the side, and you can see the ridges that he has created, not only with paint, but with texture. So that if they would let you, you could run your hands over this painting and just really feel the undulations of this hillside that he's created. And again, he has no problem stretching reality. This is not a city that would exist. It's impossible, but that doesn't matter to him. He's really creating a visual feast for us more than a realistic impression of something.
Yep.
Yeah, he really is a great surrealist painter. That's something I didn't really think about that until this exhibition. That there's a lot of things in these paintings that don't really read as true, but you have to look carefully to see them. Couple comments in chat. Gail says Laguna Rise is so cool. It's just so unique. Yes, agree with that. And Paco says this is so stunning. This reminds me of Morro Bay in San Luis Obispo.
That's right. There's that big rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just have a city
On the
on it.
Central Coast. Yeah.
All right. So here's another surreal kind of image, Diagonal Ridge. That's from 1968. And then same year, actually, Ellsworth Kelly does his Black White.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So this kind of illustrate that he didn't only emulate the classical, famous artists from back in history, but he actually looked at his contemporaries. In this particular case, Ellsworth Kelly was doing this only probably a few months earlier, and he's looking, and he's also, you notice that of course Kelly is doing very abstract, very simple geometric forms, right? So he's riffing off while still somewhat being representational with the trees and whatever he put, shrubs that he put on his painting, because that's what I think I read somewhere, that he said that he is representational of painting, but abstraction is always part of it.
I have a question for both of you. Just occurring to me, like you see this, it almost looks like a color field, like maybe he's even referencing Rothko a little bit. Is that possible?
I think that's a great observation. I don't know for sure that he was emulating Rothko deliberately, but I think it's a great observation. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
I guess
not sure.
it shows the range of Thiebaud. Like we think of him of having this Thiebaud style,
Yep.
and yet he is doing so many different things with it.
Right. This is not cakes and pies.
Yep.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's really
Or
something different that he's,
yeah, or even cityscapes that he is known for.
right.
But let's talk about some of those cityscapes, or I guess you could call this a cityscape. This is Office and Shopping Mall, another one of his later works. This was a New Yorker magazine cover. And then Mondrian's New York City, which is just such an exciting painting. And what a great way to represent New York City, huh?
Absolutely. Grid.
Put them
And you
together.
can kind of feel it, pulsing with the energy. And Mondrian was a great lover of jazz, so you can kind of feel it, right, in it. It's a very dynamic painting. And I see, with this red line through the Thiebaud direct reference to the red line on Mondrian piece. And the coloring is different, obviously, but the geometry is still there.
No,
We've got someone who may need to mute themselves. Keep going,
Thank you.
Dragana.
I'll let Charlie continue.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I love his cityscapes. I think they're absolutely fantastic. And, here you have this, presumably we're looking in at a mall, and he uses all these pastel colors, within that, which I think are so wonderful. And I love that direct reference that he makes to Mondrian with that simple vertical red
line.
because, if you look at this painting on the left, that red line makes no sense. Right? If you remove that red line, it's simply a painting of a mall. But by putting that red line there, he's saying to us, think of Mondrian, you guys. I'm deliberately making you think of those square geometric forms of Mondrian, and I'm putting them within my painting. But again, he's using his own artistic vocabulary. He's adding all these diagonal lines, for example. He's using all these pastel colors, which Mondrian would never, ever have deigned to use. He was all about primary colors. But, he's making us think of Mondrian. And I just love the textures that he develops in many of his cityscapes. This one, a little bit less, but in others, you just see all these different varieties of textures that he gets that are so great.
And I see that a couple of people in the chat are mentioning Edward Hopper, and Thiebaud did say that he was also looking at Hopper often. And absolutely, you're right. If you look at lower right-hand side of Thiebaud's painting, that could be, one of those Hopper's scenes of the bar or whatever.
Like here, lone woman.
And one on the right, look at that lonely woman in front of the vitrine or whatever that is. So yes, Hopper was definitely on his radar, and he looked at him a lot.
Yeah, and going back to those postcards, I went on one of the docent tours at the museum, which they're great. I really recommend them. And she was saying, well, he just believed that you should engage with art, not just in museums, but even looking at a postcard was a way of appreciating art. Absolutely. And, we kind of see that here, like the fact that he puts this on a New Yorker cover. This would just show up in the mail for many of us. And, maybe, I don't know how many people would make that connection to the Mondrian painting, but he just wanted to put that out there. All right, we'll move on. So more of the streets, and this is a great one, especially for, I think, people in San Francisco. For some reason, this always makes me think of San Francisco.
Yep.
It's paired with this Diebenkorn from his Ocean Park series, and here they are side by side. It's kind of a funny way to put them because it's almost the gray line is actually the dividing line between these two paintings, but it almost looks like they could be one work together.
And they were friends, and Thiebaud definitely looked at Ocean Park series a lot, and I found somewhere that he actually visited Diebenkorn in his studio in Santa Monica when he was doing these Ocean Park paintings, and he said you could see by just walking around his studio, inside of the studio, you can see where his inspiration came from, even though it's not directly translated on the painting. But in this particular case, the geometry, the coloring, the straight lines, intersecting each other, diagonals. Look at the diagonal on Thiebaud. You do see the diagonals on Diebenkorn there too. That's right. So lots of things they have in common.
And one of the things I love about his cityscapes, and this is a good example of that, is if you look at the building on the far left, Rodney, and then you run along the left border of that building, there are all these different colors and textures that he's putting all along that vertical there. He does the same thing if you go 2 buildings over, with that green center. If you look at the right angle, no, move a little bit to the right.
To the right.
To the right, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, look at all those different colors and textures that he's producing there. So not only is he showing you the buildings en face, like directly to the sideways, but he's telling you the story of what's going on in the buildings. There's all kinds of activity there. There are people on terraces and people with flowers on their terraces and things like that that he's including in that. And then if you look at the lower portion of the painting, Diebenkorn, I always think of Diebenkorn as flying in a plane, looking down at farmland, and you see all these different shapes and geometric portions within the farmland. But that's what Thiebaud is doing too. If you look at that highway, it's like we're looking from an airplane down. So it doesn't make sense. He's again twisting perspective in so many different ways. We have these buildings which seem to follow sort of the normal rules of perspective, but then we have this curve that goes off that doesn't. We have this hill that clearly doesn't. I mean, you can't drive up a hill like that, right?
Look at all those cars,
right?
Parked cars.
Right. And then he gives you these shadows that are,
Yeah.
so, the sun is coming from the left of the painting, and you get these weird shadows, which, create these really strange diagonal lines. The geometry of this painting is fascinating.
Yeah. It does make, you have to think he loved San Francisco, because this is like kind of a loving portrait. It makes me think of California Street. But there's other streets we could probably think of. Paco says it's making him think of Beverly Hills or Mission Bay. I love this little cupola on top of this building. Like, just thinks like something really cool is going inside of that, right? So let's keep going. So here's now farmland. Cypress Farms makes you think of the Central Valley, 1995 to 1996. And then here's a Diebenkorn beach, and here they are side by side. So how does this compare with the other pairing of Diebenkorn and Thiebaud?
Here it seems to me it's more coloring and geometric shapes, right? You see those trapezoidal forms on both of them, this big swaths of yellow, and it just seems like moods seem to be the what's common. Coloring seem to be what's common between two of them.
Anything to add to that, Charlie?
Oh, to me, his landscapes are just bar none his best work, and this is a great example of it. So like you have with the Diebenkorn, you have these sort of large fields or large geometric forms. But then what he does, and I think we have a close-up of this, Rodney, is that in the center he has this unbelievable, rich, multicolored field of I don't know what the produce would be, but it doesn't matter. He just is playing with color here in this very specific way, and giving us these shadows of the cypress trees. Cypress trees are just so classically used in impressionistic art. Van Gogh used to have cypress in if you look at Starry Night, there's cypress trees, and they have odd connotations and they mean something back then that they don't no longer mean to us. But then look at the colors that he puts behind this. This is my favorite part of the painting is that, and if you think about Van Gogh did a work that's very similar to this, where you see fields of flowers. And so he's really nodding to several painters. It's not just Diebenkorn that he's nodding to when he does this painting. He's nodding to several different painters. This is just a joy to behold when you're in front of this and you can stare right at that collection of colors.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like this is such a great exhibition that you're really going to want to give yourself some time. Like I ended up staying 4 hours at the museum, and the whole time was looking at the Thiebaud. So it really does lend itself to that. A couple comments in chat. Gail was commenting earlier on the cityscapes that to her it's a totally relatable alternate reality. If you step outside mathematical possibility, his perspective is mentally feasible. Love that comment. Oh, who is the artist on the right? Priscilla asks. Let's go back. That's Diebenkorn. So
yeah, I just put it in the chat.
Richard Diebenkorn. All right, we'll move on. So now another landscape of sorts, Blue Ridge Mountain from 1961. This is, I believe, an unknown artist, but something he found.
It's a follower of Thomas Hill, apparently, that Thiebaud found this painting in a thrift shop in Sacramento. Can you imagine you're just rummaging through a thrift shop and you see, apparently it's very small painting, and he thought, oh, this kind of looks like Thomas Hill, so he bought it. And he said he learned from that painting. Actually, I'm going to read it, what he said. I've learned more from that little painting than nearly anything else I've come across in my long life, if you can believe that. So you can see how that's inspiring his own painting on this vertical perspective, this plunging slopes going straight down, and then of course that idea of waterfall right there, that stream of white against the darkness of the mountain. So you see the inspiration.
Anything to add to that, Charlie?
No.
Let's move on to this.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have some portraits. This is Standing Man and Pierrot. And here they are together.
Right. And I saw this painting many years ago before this exhibition. They had an exhibition up at the Shrem Gallery in Davis. And I remember being fascinated by this painting. And in particular, I don't think we have a close-up of the shoes, but the shoes are remarkable. And the way he uses that halation, the idea of these halo-like effects around the shoes, he's using all these different colors, which it's very hard to appreciate in this particular painting because it's kind of losing some of the sharpness. But I was also taken by this, by the stance of the man. I thought, that's sort of an odd way to show someone. And I knew this Watteau painting, but I hadn't put the two of them together. And of course, these curators are just brilliant. And they when you put them side by side, you go, of course he's looking at Watteau, when he does this. It's virtually the same. The heads turn slightly to the right in the Watteau, it's slightly to the left in the Thiebaud. But it's just wonderful. It's just a great way to look at a classic work of art and put it in your own modern context.
What's interesting to me is the compositionally, he's pushing the man head pretty much to the edge of the painting and leaving this large swath of the ground in front, which is not what Watteau was doing. It's much more proportional, if you want. So you wonder, what is he creating tension by pushing the whole body all the way up. What is he trying to achieve by creating composition?
He makes a lot of very
That
interesting choices.
choice is very unusual, right?
And look at the shadow that he does along the bottom portion of that shadow. You can see blue.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not what I would think of as the color that you might see in a shadow, unless you had a blue light that was also adding to that, you know. But that's what he chooses. That's what he sees. And it's just a really wonderful effect. The shoes, if you go to the exhibit, pay attention to the shoes. They're absolutely wonderful. I have a photo of just the shoes.
Just the shoes.
You know, that I've hung up. Yeah, because I love it. Yeah.
He actually has a painting of the shoes, just shoes.
Right.
That was, I saw it a few years ago.
Oh, it's either in the exhibit or in the catalog. I can't
Okay.
Oh,
remember.
it's in the exhibit. There's just the shoes that are paired up with
Van Gogh.
Van
Van
Gogh.
Gogh shoe.
Yeah, there's
Right.
we don't have any of the Van Gogh paintings in this presentation, but there's also the Postman, and one of the portraits is paired up with the Postman
Mm-hmm.
painting. All right, so this is Supine Woman, and the woman, by the way, is his daughter. And then paired up with Manet's The Dead Toreador. Very famous painting.
I think this is just a brilliant pairing. So he worked and reworked this painting. So in the original paint, or at least in his original studies, he has Twinka in the same position. Like right now, Twinka's head's to the left. In the original working of the painting, he has her head to the right, and he has her in a dark dress. So it'd be closer to what Manet was doing with the Dead Toreador. But you know, to me, this painting just makes me laugh. You know, this doesn't. You know, this is not. You know, the Manet is a tragic scene. This
Yep.
looks like a woman who's just had it, and she's lying down
Exactly.
and just sort of looking up. You know, and she's like, "Oh, I need to get away from whatever thought process was going on, whatever noise is in the outside world," and she's just decided she's just going to lie down flat in the middle of the floor.
It's kind of how a lot of us feel right now, I think.
Yeah, it's a really radical perspective. It's kind of skewed. It's really difficult to kind of get your sense where she is. Where's the end of the floor? Where wall starts? It's really ambiguous in that sense. But she does look like she had it.
Yeah.
I agree.
And he makes a bold choice, putting white on white.
Yep.
You know, there's not a lot of people who would make that choice. They would deliberately choose a more contrasting color, like he did in the beginning. You know, a dark dress that she's in. He decides to go back to or change to white on white. It's a very bold choice. You know, Manet is clearly showing lots of contrast between what's in the background and the Dead Toreador. We're not seeing that with the Thiebaud.
You know, what about these shadows? What do you guys think of this?
Yeah.
These little blue shadows under the body.
Classic.
Well, again, we're looking at two different light sources then, right? Because if you think about it, her head's shadow is, I'm going to just use the directions of the painting. Her head shadow goes directly to the left. Her foot shadow is going to the right, right? So again, he's playing with us. He's making us sort of stretch the bounds of what would really be happening.
Yeah, kind of like a Magritte, even though Magritte isn't someone who gets referenced in this exhibition, you got to think he had some influence.
Right.
Yep.
All right. Betty Jean Thiebaud, this is his second wife, Betty Jean, in book. And then here's Picasso. We could choose you could choose other things to pair this with. I think the exhibition mentioned some others, but what do you think? What do you think of this pairing, Dragana?
What I see is a pose. It's in both cases, woman with the book in front of her or in her hands, with one hand on her face, similar in that sense, And then everything else is pretty much very different, right? It's the coloring that Picasso is using versus very kind of somber, quiet, white and black contrasty colors that Thiebaud uses with that white band in her hair, but both are contemplative, so their mood could be called the same, similar. He's also, if you look at the book, and I read it somewhere, that he opened the book on on two of his favorite paintings. I think
One's like a Velasquez, right?
I can't remember. I think he said it's what it was. I think one was Thiebaud, but I'm not sure. But anyway, again, he's even. But what he did also say is that for a long time, book was not there. He started the painting of Betty Jean just as a straight portrait of her and asked her to, sit at the desk. Book was not there, and he said he felt that it was not right, that something was not right with the painting, and left it for a while, and then came back to it and decided that what it needs is a book in front. So he added it.
And Gail says, I like how the white shadow line on her left sleeve guides her eye to the book.
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Indeed.
it's a great.
Yeah, it's a nice observation, Gail. Yeah, it certainly goes straight.
And there's so many of these vertical lines in his paintings. We'll see more of that later on. Let's talk about this one, Makeup Girl, and a bar at the Folie Bergère.
Mhm.
Comparing these two. Charlie, what do you think of these two paintings? What's going on?
Well, I think their reference to the Manet is really clear. I think he was clearly looking at Manet. I have to tell you, for me, one of Thiebaud's weaknesses are his portraits. I think he's not great at depicting humans. This painting to me looks like, quite frankly, it could have been done by one of his students. It doesn't have a sophistication to me. I mean, if you look at, even that Picasso that we were just looking at, if we just go back for just a second, in my mind, there's like more personality in that almost cartoonish face that Picasso's doing than there is either in this face or the one that comes afterward. But I think he's still making us think about the Manet. We have basically the same stance. We have a woman with both her arms at her side. The Manet woman looks even more bored than the Thiebaud woman. But it's the same idea. Instead of liquor bottles, he has perfume bottles here. And in the back, I think we decided that those are sort of makeup containers, like you might see pancake makeup in or something like that. Yeah, not one of my favorite paintings in the exhibit.
Well, I would just say that I think what he captured here, looking at Manet and Thiebaud, both are these women that are there, but they're really not there. They're somewhere in their own, thoughts, totally removed from the actual space, the Folie Bergère with all the bustling energy that's around her. She is not seeing it. She is either sad, or you can say you can come up with a story about why she looks the way she does, and but she's certainly not uh, talking to this guy in a mirror. You see that he's facing her and asking her, and she's obviously not reacting to him. And I think Thiebaud's woman has that same look of I'm here, but I'm really not. I'm somewhere else. And I don't know, is it sadness? You can kind of interpret it one way or another, but the fact that she's at the makeup counter and then look at her makeup face almost feels like she kind of decorated herself with all the stuff in front of her. And there is some poignancy to me in that too.
You can hand me his landscapes, his cityscapes, his confections. I'll take those any day over his portraits.
Right. Yeah, Gail's noting it's a vacant stare.
Vacant, very much so in both
And
cases. Yeah.
Paco says this is so profound when the lady is standing, like making cocktails. We have a couple more that we have a lot of paintings in this presentation, but Woman in Tub, which I think is again Betty Jean, and then here we have the Marat assassinated painting. So here we are comparing these two.
So, yeah, so for me, this painting does work. I think this is a really terrific painting in its simplicity. I mean, if you look at the composition of it, what we have is a elongated bathtub, right? We don't really have a bathtub that long, or most of us don't anyway. You can imagine cutting off that painting, several feet on the right, and it would make sense. Here, he's really, really extending out that painting and giving us more of like an abyss or a nothingness, an emptiness. And here, you have this woman who, again, when I'm in the bath, I'm really happy. I'm soaking and enjoying it. She really looks distraught to me. That she's got a weighted mind, and this is, I think, one of Thiebaud's better depictions of a woman's face. I think it's a little bit more interesting than some of his others. But just the composition alone makes this painting fascinating. And when you see it, you really get the length of it. It's the first thing that strikes you. And the pure simplicity of it, except for the head, what do you have? You could basically have a Diebenkorn painting. You have these large geometric shapes, these very, defined lines. There's not any texture in there. There's no texture in the water. There's no texture in the outward part of the bathtub. The only textures and colors that you see are of her head. And I think it makes for an interesting painting and a thoughtful and provocative painting.
Gail's saying Thiebaud invented the infinite tub. Look how her ear is horizontal too. Yeah, that's really interesting. Good point.
And she's really again somewhere else. There is a profound sadness on her face, the way she's portrayed, and in that way she's relating to this death scene on the right, where we're looking at dead Marat. And
we have a question from Nikki. Is the lady in the tub the same lady in the white dress? Actually, no. I think the woman in the white dress was Twinka, his daughter.
Yes.
And this is his wife. And
this is probably Betty Jean. Yeah. This looks like a Betty Jean.
There's a lot of Betty Jean in there. This may also be Betty Jean. So we've got these two figures eating fast food, 1963. And then Degas l'Absinthe. And let's compare these two. Dragana, why don't we start with you?
Oh, well, I'm with Charlie on this one. I'm not very fond of this particular painting. On the left, it bothers me somehow. I see in Degas it's Degas, right? It's Degas on the right. I see again, it's probably somebody at the end of their rope or at the end of their drink, even though their glass is full, but they look like two alcoholics and kind of despair almost. And these two on the left, I suppose, talk about addiction. Maybe you can find a connection. Addiction here, addiction there, right? The fast food and hot dogs versus the alcohol on the right.
They may be Dodger dogs.
Oh, okay.
These are Giants fans that have been served Dodger dogs.
They look very unhappy.
Yes. Well,
I'm with Dragana. I'm not crazy about this painting, but I think that what makes it interesting is to look at the painting on the right.
Yeah.
Because it really does have, like that woman is in an absent case. You know what I mean? And this woman on the left, in Thiebaud's painting, is in, is post-argument. She and the guy on the right, have had some issues. We don't know what they are, but I think that, that's what this painting shows, is that sort of light lack of connectivity between these two. And he likes to do that. There's another painting that you'll see in the exhibit, which we don't have here today, where you see, I think it's 5 people or 6 people that are all looking in completely different directions. So there's literally the lack of intercourse between them, and so it's, I think this painting has that same idea. Again, if you look at his figures, they're not that well done. That guy on the right, again, any number of art students could have done exactly that same painting. So for me, his people are less interesting. They're just less fully realized.
What about the shoes, Charlie?
Shoes,
The shoes are great.
Shoes are
The
great.
shoes are great. They're always great with Thiebaud. He loves his shoes, and and when you look at these up close, you'll get that same idea of the halation, the different colors that he's using along the edge. I mean, these are black shoes, right? With maybe a tan bottom, and all the colors that he adds. I wish we had a close-up of it. All the colors that he adds to the shoes are just remarkable, and that's really why, again, you gotta go to the exhibit. You gotta put your nose right in front of that painting as close as the guard will let you, and enjoy the different colors that he's using.
So with that, I think we have to wrap up because we are at the end of our time. A couple of nice comments in chat. I read about Twinka, I think, online. She went to Redwood High School in Larkspur. She was a model and writer and even wrote about the novelist Miller, who she cared for in his later years. And Gail says, thank you to us. It's one of our favorite talks. We love hearing that. Charlie, Dragana, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Topic and
It's wonderful.
Yep.
Wonderful comments from everybody.
Love the comments. Get yourselves.
It was a very great program, just me, Rodney.
We have the Jefferson Airplane tonight.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yep. Get your boarding pass. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you, Rodney.
See you in 2 weeks. See you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Nikki.
Bye, Paco.
Good night, Rodney.
Bye, Roger. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Charlie.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, Jennifer.